All right, so right now, about 1 in 5 home sellers in some of the most major and significant housing markets here in the United States are slashing their asking prices. Now, that's a pretty decent shift from what we've seen in the past few years, but it's not necessarily a very, very new trend. It's actually been going on for quite some time now. And I think a lot of folks realize here we are, we've probably had some of these, metros that have just risen quite significantly. And I'm going to get into why I think this is going on. This is from Realtor.com. Realtor.com, this article here, Julie Taylor, March 25th, 2026. And she goes on to say that the metros that had the biggest price cut, it started with Phoenix, Mesa, Chandler, Arizona. 28.2% of listings were actually marked down in February. So it's a pretty decent amount of homes. So 28% of the listings that for sale saw a price drop. And then some of the other high rate of cuts she included in the article were Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater in Florida, San Antonio, Texas, Tucson, Arizona, Portland, Oregon, as well as Hillsboro, Oregon, and the Washington state area as well. She mentioned that 20% or more, roughly around, let's call it between 20 and 22% between Jacksonville, Dallas, Fort Worth, Orlando, Kissimmee, Sanford, Florida, and Austin, Round Rock, San Marcos, Texas. Now, I can tell you, assuredly, especially in areas like Austin and Round Rock, areas in Florida, Orlando, Jacksonville, Miami, we saw, I would venture to say, price gains in the post-pandemic era. The 2-3 year stretch, we saw price gains as high as 50 to 80%, even 100% in some of these locations. So it's natural to expect to see some of these markets that really saw the biggest increase over those years to see price cuts, right? And one of the things that people don't think about, or maybe they do, is there's the psychology of the seller. When you're a seller and you list your home for sale and you see prices as high as they get and you get excited and you go, well, I'm going to put my house for sale for that much. But in reality, we've gone through now almost the last 2 years where it's taken that long for the psychology of the seller to actually change and realize, I can't get that price that I thought I could get, that I keep seeing all over the place. I check Zillow and I check Realtor.com and I check all these other sites that say this is what my house is worth. But in reality, it's getting harder and harder to get that price. But a seller has to go through a process where they realize that, right? And that psychology is finally, I think, caught up where sellers are like, all right, I got to lower the price if I actually want to sell this house. And we know I've been talking a lot about affordability pressures. In the same affordability pressures are in some of these same areas where, you're seeing a couple of things. You're seeing, I think, and it's a major driver. I think you're seeing just, higher rates. We talk about this a lot. It's just hard to afford, and so buyers push back, right? But we're also seeing a bit of an inventory shift. Some of these areas are seeing supply increase as well. Inventory of homes kind of just slowly increasing in some of these areas. In Florida, just more people selling. And again, that puts a lot more pressure on sellers to accommodate, right? To put a price that would actually lure buyers in. So you combine that mindset shift, affordability, talk about supply increasing, all of that is playing a factor in some of these major metros. Now, I want to clarify, because price cuts doesn't necessarily mean that, prices are coming down. A lot of these areas, if you kind of look historically in the last few years, prices may have come down a little bit, or maybe flatlined, especially in certain neighborhoods that are in high demand, even in some of these areas. In a lot of cases, you just had sellers price too aggressively, price too high, and they're just adjusting. They're just adjusting to where the market really is. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be such an obvious thing for a lot of sellers. It's not like you sell your home every day, right? It's going to be sellers that maybe some of these sellers are putting a home on the market for the first time in maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 years in some cases. So again, I don't think that it's random. I think that the places that were mentioned as seeing these price cuts, I just think they had some of the biggest price run-ups. I know I talked to folks actually in Austin, Texas, who told me their homes have doubled in value after that, during the post-pandemic era. So, a place like Austin, Texas saw some significant moves higher in the value of homes, and including places like Miami, Florida as well, Orlando and Tampa, Florida as well. So I want to call this normalization. I don't want to call this a housing crash. I don't want to call this, prices are coming down. It's normal to expect this type of thing. Listen, from the buyer perspective, I think if you are looking, you probably have more negotiating power in these areas than you otherwise would. You probably have a better opportunity. And I always say, when I advise sellers, I tell them, look, price correctly from the start. You start too high, you got to bring the price down, and adjust accordingly. But now you become this sort of stale home on the market. You sit there too long, for weeks at a time, and people start wondering, well, what's wrong? Why doesn't the house sell? Price it correctly, price it right around. Because right now, most things, especially in these areas I mentioned, and some of the sort of harder to afford areas, nobody's reaching. Nobody's paying over market value. They're paying at or below market value. That's what buyers and investors are looking at, and that's what they're looking for. So keep that in mind too. Sellers do need to be realistic. But, to me, I look at this as like, look, we're seeing a market that's adjusting. It was a big run up, just like anything else. When a stock runs up really high, it's got to kind of calm down a little bit, And it's what I think we're just in a transition. Most of these areas are just in a transition where, sellers are getting more realistic, buyers are getting a little bit more picky, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. It's a normal cadence that you should see in a market that's run up so far, so fast. And a lot of these housing markets have done just exactly that. And that's okay. That's what I would expect to see. And that's what we are seeing for now. That is it for me today. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. And as always, if you have questions or need specific advice, ideas, or just some help regarding your particular real estate needs or situation, or if you're just looking to buy or sell real estate in Florida, well then DM me on Instagram at The Salib Group, or just send me an email to mark@thesalibgroup.com. Don't forget to leave a rating for the show, follow, subscribe, help others find the show, and be informed and educated about the real estate market just like you. Until next time.